Hello, my name is Dr. Kurt Sander, and this is Music Theory Simplified. Today we are going to explore Roman numerals. And not Roman numerals as you may have learned them in elementary school. We're going to look at Roman numerals as they apply to the area of music theory. Roman numerals can provide us a wealth of information about what's happening in the music. But where did Roman numerals come from? How did they start being used in music? And why wouldn't we just use regular old numbers?
Believe it or not, the so-called Arabic numerals that we use today have not always been the standard. It should come as no surprise that the first appearance of Roman numerals came in ancient Rome around the 7th century BC. Some historians have speculated that the Roman numeral actually comes from the tally marks that shepherds used to use when counting sheep. But in terms of musical application, it was the composer-theorist Georg Vogler who first came up with the idea of using Roman numerals as a way of distinguishing between pitches and chords. This has a number of advantages. Today in music, whenever we use Arabic numerals, that refers to a pitch within a scale. So this note G, for example, in the key of C is the 5th note of the scale. We know it refers to scale degree because of that little notch above the number which we call a caret. But when that same note is harmonized with notes from the scale, as in this case, there's more information that needs to be conveyed. The quality of this triad, for example, or whether it's in root position or inversion. This is where Roman numerals can really come in handy. For example, we can use the capital form of a Roman numeral to indicate a major triad, and we can also use a lowercase form of the Roman numeral to indicate minor. We can also use the little subscript number to indicate inversion signs.
But there's a whole lot more to it than that. Let me show you what I mean.
Context.
Every Roman numeral has a function in a certain key. For example, the C major chord in C major is a 1 chord. It's the tonic or the home chord, the chord that usually begins and ends a piece. A 1 chord in G major will have different pitches, but the function or the context will be the same. It's the home chord. In F major, the pitches are different, but the function is the same.
So you can see that if you know the function of Roman numerals, or how chords interact with each other, it really doesn't matter what key you're in, because the function of that Roman numeral is the same. It provides context.
Which Roman numeral we use is determined by where the root of the chord lies in the scale. When we harmonize these pitches, you can see that the numbers refer to scale degree, but they change into Roman numerals, and these indicate the quality of the chord. Let's analyze a chord together. For now, let's just stick with major keys. Here we have a triad, and the root is F. Now if we look at the key signature, we know that that's B flat major. So where does F occur in the scale of B flat major? That will determine which Roman numeral we use. So if we look at the scale, we see that the root F is the 5th note in the sequence. So instead of using the Arabic number 5, we're going to use the Roman numeral 5 because we're talking about a chord. The 5 chord is called the dominant chord. And just like the tonic, it has its own special function. It doesn't matter what key you're in. A dominant functions like a dominant.
So these words, dominant and tonic, what do they mean and where do they come from, and what words do we use to describe other chords?
So when we look at the major scale, we can see the variety of chord qualities that are created by way of stacking thirds on top of each note. Now, we are already familiar with the terms tonic and dominant, which refer to the very important chords built on the 1st and 5th notes of the scale. Now, in a major key, these two chords will always be major in quality. But you can see that because of the way the notes of the scale are arranged, some chords will be major, some will be minor, and one built on the 7th scale degree, something we call the leading tone chord, will have a special quality we call diminished. A diminished chord is simply 2 minor thirds stacked on top of one another, and the sound is very unstable. Now these names, these terms of chords, are important to know because eventually they will become associated with functionality or harmonic grammar. In other words, certain chords behave in certain ways in tonal music. We won't delve into this aspect of music in this lesson, but by knowing the names, you will begin to understand each chord's unique place in the scale.
So while you're memorizing the names of these chords, we also need to be able to identify them in a musical score. So let's try a few together and see if we can get the hang of it.
Okay, here we have a chord in C major, and the root of this chord is F, and I've colored it in red here for convenience. What we have to decide is where this F occurs in the scale. Looking at the scale, we can see that it lands on the 4th step, or the 4th scale degree. So our Roman numeral is going to be 4. But since this chord is an F major chord, we need to use a capital 4. It's also in root position, so there's no need to put a little superscript next to the number.
So it's really a matter of finding the root of the chord and determining where the root of that chord occurs in the scale, and finally to identify whether it's in root position or inversion. Let's try one that's a bit more challenging now.
Here's a 4-note chord in F major. Now there are 4 pieces of information you need to produce the correct Roman numeral. 1, you need to determine the root. 2, you need to figure out where the root occurs in the scale. 3, you need to determine whether it's major, minor, or diminished. And 4, finally, you need to figure out if it's in root position or inversion. You should push pause now, figure these things out, and come back and see if you have the right answer.
Okay, let's see how you did.
Now, if you analyze this chord and stacked it in thirds, you'd find that B flat is the root. There are 2 of them. And in the key of F major, B flat is the 4th scale degree. So our Roman numeral is going to be 4. And since this is a major chord, we are going to use a capital 4. Lastly, because the 3rd is the lowest note, it's in first inversion. And our symbol for first inversion is 6. So your final analysis should show that this is a 4/6 chord in F major.
So how did you do? Well, let's try another one and make sure that you have this down before we move on.
Here's a chord that exists in E major. So I want you to pause the video and answer the following questions. What is the root? Where does the root occur in the scale? Is it major or minor or diminished? And is it in root position or inversion? Those 4 questions will give you the Roman numeral answer.
Okay, let's see how you did.
If you stack these notes in a compressed triad, you'll see that the lowest note, or the root, is F sharp. And F sharp in the key of E major is the 2nd scale degree. And this is a minor chord, so we're looking at a lowercase Roman numeral 2. And our last thing we have to look at is if it's in inversion or root position. And we can see that the A is the 3rd of this chord. So our answer will be lowercase 2, 6.
This process takes a little bit of practice to get down perfectly. Like a math problem, it involves many different steps, and if you make a mistake at any one of those points, you could get the wrong answer. The best way to get better at this is practice. And over time, I think a lot of these things will be done in your head, and you won't necessarily have to do them on a different staff or to think visually about this. One of the things that I want to do for our next lesson is to look a little bit at the qualities of Roman numerals as they exist both in major and minor. Because if we can identify that a 4 is always major when it's in major, then we don't have to go through that extra step of seeing if it's a major or minor triad. We just know that a 4 is major if it's in major key. Well, that's all the time we have for today's lesson. I encourage you to take a look at Roman numerals Part 2, where we talk about these things. Until next time, this is Kurt Sander. Keep it simple.